Hi, I'm Christina, and this is a book review of the Book of Etta by Meg Elison. So this is the second book in the Road to Nowhere series, and it was published in 2017. The first book in the series was called The Book of the Unnamed Midwife, and I absolutely love that one. I read it last year and I gave it 5 stars. It's one of my favourite post-apocalyptic fiction novels of all time, so I was very much looking forward to reading this one, and I enjoyed this one too. I've given this one 4 stars, so I definitely enjoyed it, but not quite as much as the first book. So in this book we follow the character of Etta. She is known as Etta in the place where she lives, the town of Nowhere, but she's known as Eddie when she's travelling the road. She is a raider, so she goes out and she's trying to find useful things to bring back to her community, and she's also trying to rescue women and girls who she finds in bad situations. She tries to rescue them and then bring them back to the safety of her hometown of Nowhere. So this book is set about a century after the events of the Book of the Unnamed Midwife. It says this is year 104 in the Nowhere Codex, so 104 years after the Book of the Unnamed Midwife. And the woman in the first book, who is known as the Unnamed, is kind of their legend, the person who started their town, and she's seen as, I don't know, not a celebrity, but someone very much to look up to, and she's a really important figure in their town's history. So it's really interesting to see that the person you followed in the first book has become this kind of renowned figure in this story, and obviously none of the people alive in this story have ever actually met the Unnamed because it's been a century. So as Etta is a raider, it's actually very unusual for a woman to be a raider in Nowhere. I think she is the only one. The majority of women in this town are either mothers or they're midwives. So in the original book, the Unnamed Midwife was a midwife in what they call the old world, the world before the apocalypse. So that was her profession. And then she has passed all of that knowledge and experience and all her skills down to other people. Other women in this town. So yes, you're either a mother or you're a midwife, and there is a law in place to say that you can't be both because of the risks associated with that. So essentially Etta is quite unusual in the sense that she hasn't chosen the path to be a mother or the path to be a midwife, and the thing that she really enjoys doing is travelling outside of the town and trying to find women and girls who she can rescue, and that is her mission, that's her passion, I would say. She wants to find people, especially women and girls, who are in need, and she wants to rescue them and then take them back to her town of Nowhere and then leave essentially. She doesn't want to help them adjust to the town, or she doesn't want to, you know, be friendly with them in any sort of way. She just wants to help people, bring them to safety, and then leave again and try to find someone else that she can help. That's everything that she really, really wants to do. And the other thing that's really interesting, in the first book, it was called The Book of the Unnamed Midwife because the Unnamed Midwife actually wrote a diary, and her diary has become almost like scripture to the people of this town. It's a book that they will all read, and it's become like a legend, or everything that the town is built upon. So her stories are really, really important, and people have read them, like people might have read the Bible, for example, and they can refer to certain passages, and there's teachings in the stories where certain things will be like, oh, do you remember so-and-so of the story, which means this? So she's become their kind of religion, if you will, as well as their kind of cultural identity and their values and their traditions. Everything has come from her. So everybody now in the town writes their own diary, the book of whoever they are. It's become a tradition that everybody will keep a record of their lives for other people to see what's happened in the future. So they are definitely a town of people who record histories. So one of the really big important themes in this story is how Etta, Eddie question their own sexual identity, their own gender identity. But it's very difficult to kind of comment upon because all of the words Etta, Eddie needs to kind of understand themselves and explain who they are, all of these words have been lost. So for some part of the book, Etta, Eddie is with another character, and it's kind of said what would this be called, this scenario? And then the idea is, well, we don't really have a word for that, and we don't know if there ever was a word for that. In the old world, was that a thing? Did any of this have a word, if you see what I'm trying to say? So following a character in a post-apocalyptic setting who is questioning their own sexual identity and gender identity, but can't really refer to any kind of literature or knowledge, if that makes sense, because it doesn't exist and it's been lost. It's really interesting to see it in this kind of setting as well, because I don't think I've ever read like a post-apocalyptic fiction book where a character is kind of questioning their own sexual identity, gender identity. So yeah, I really enjoyed this one overall. I've given it 4 stars. I didn't enjoy it quite as much as the first one, The Book of the Unnamed Midwife. That was 5 stars. And it will be interesting to read the 3rd book in the series. So obviously the first one was The Book of the Unnamed Midwife, so we were following the unnamed midwife. This one is The Book of Etta. It's 100 years later and we're following Etta and Eddie. And the 3rd book in the series is called The Book of Flora. So Flora is one of the very important characters in this story, but I haven't referred to Flora just for fear of spoilers. I didn't want to explain who Flora is or where Flora is from, for example, because I did try, and everything I want to say about the character will become kind of spoiler territory. So yeah, Flora is a very important character in this story, and I think is the main character of the next story. I'm not too sure about the time difference when we next meet Flora. So obviously we follow Flora in this story as kind of a secondary character, because our main character is Etta and Eddie, but obviously Flora's going to become the main character. But I'm not sure about the time difference. I'm not quite sure when it's going to be set, so that'll be interesting too, to see if we go back in time and see Flora previously, if we meet Flora from the end of this story or somewhere in the middle. Not really sure, so that's going to be interesting. But yes, I still think this is a really good kind of post-apocalyptic fiction novel. It's one of the very kind of real and raw kind of ones. It feels just very real. It's very heartbreaking at times, very difficult. It's got some really difficult themes it explores, and it can be very dark at times too, so I think it seems very kind of realistic. But yeah, I enjoyed it. It's a good book, and I'm looking forward to reading the 3rd one. If you have read this one, I would love to know what you thought of it down in the comments below, and if you've read the 3rd one, I'd love to know if you enjoyed that one too. And if you haven't read, obviously, any of these, let me know if you're interested in reading them too. Alright, I'll see you in my next one.